So let me take this opportunity to welcome our guest. We have Ed Beck, and it's our privilege to have Ed Beck to our session. He's a CM Lean credential holder with a 50 plus years of construction industry experience and 24 years of a lean exposure, conducting several courses including LCEP courses 175 times. He will be talking about the practical aspect and the benefit of last planner system. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I have been involved in construction for a very long time, and most of construction in America was very adversarial. Like Tony mentioned earlier, people were just out for themselves, and they weren't getting a whole lot done, and construction was declining. So in 1997, where I worked in Houston, Texas, the two founders of the Lean Construction Institute came to our office one day and said, we want to show you something. So the president of the company and myself listened to these two wonderful men, and it sounded so unintuitive to what we'd always been doing. And when they left, I said, that will never work. And so my boss suggested I read a couple of books that I read, and then I understood it. So then I started being trained by these two men, and I started employing it on all the projects that I was responsible for. And very soon, our company and 4 other companies were asked if we would put up some funds to open the Lean Construction Institute. It really already existed, but they didn't have much budget. So we put up the money, and the Lean Construction Institute started, and I started studying about Lean through these two founders, Glenn Ballard and Greg Howell. Lean construction is not so much about what we need to do, but it's about the way we need to treat each other, the way we need to be with each other. So it's more of a way to be than it is a way to do, but there are good ways to do. So I'm going to show you a few slides of projects that I have coached and use that to give you some information. First, I've got 3 slides about what didn't work so well for construction forever. One is the over-reliance on the CPM, usually made by 1 or 2 people who often were not going to be actually involved in the project. So I have a long time said that too few people were planning for too many. CPM has a very important place in construction. We think it has its uses, but it's not the best way to manage a project. And that will surprise a lot of you. So another thing that happened, this is a typical US construction meeting prior to Lean. There are people sitting around a table. One person, a superintendent, is talking, and everybody else doesn't really want to be there. You can see their arms folded. They're just itching to get out of the room. And so the superintendent instructs people what he wants done, and he asks a few questions, and very little information gets exchanged in such meetings. Another thing about these meetings, they're limited to how many can come to the meeting by the size of the room and the table. And the table really doesn't offer anything, but it takes up space. And if you look here in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, you can see somebody didn't have a seat at the table, and he was probably glad he could sort of drift into the background and not be asked any questions. This is a project that focused too much on resource efficiency and on getting my part done well. The contractor had a shell contractor who was to do the concrete work, the structure, and the enclosure. And what they did was they got as much done as they could possibly do to maximize the use of their people and their equipment, but they didn't advance the project so that others could follow them. In this particular case, they had in the center building, they had a structural steel problem. And in the right-hand case, they were supposed to put roof trusses up, but those were late. And so they couldn't take the shoring out of either of those two buildings. And so there was no slab on grade. So they maximized the number of units that they got done, but they didn't provide any place for any following trades to go to work. So they took up about half of the schedule and left the rest of the trades a shorter schedule to try to get done, which leads to that overburden that Tony was talking about. This is another instance of too much focus on resource efficiency. This project, nobody understands why. It was down the street from one of the projects I was coaching. It was a large multi-use, 6 or 7 different buildings to go in, about 5 stories each, but they put up all the columns first, and they didn't follow that with slabs on top of the columns. There was nowhere else for anybody to go to work because they were trying to maximize their resource efficiency. So Lean comes along and we have a more collaborative approach where we're bringing other people in to do the thinking as well. We're bringing in the people who are actually building it to do the thinking for themselves and share that with others. So this is my very crude sketch of what smooth workflow would look like. A direction through the building would be chosen, and every trade would follow the previous trade in that direction, and it would be smooth and things would get done very well. But often things go wrong with that, and we call that variation. So every one of those lines, it could have been a smooth path being followed by subsequent trades, turns into a scramble of lines of people working wherever they can to keep busy instead of building the building that needs to be built. The building usually gets built, but with a lot of waste and a lot of scrambling and too much time. So what we're trying to do is get rid of the variation and go back to the smooth, productive workflow. So this is the idea of many brains being involved in the planning rather than just the person who made the CPM schedule. I'll come back to this slide a little later, but all of these are the foreman of the crews on a particular job talking about how they're going to hand off their work to the next trade that needs to follow them. And there was a lot of interest in this session. Everybody was paying attention. They didn't just want to be told what to do. They wanted to participate in how they should organize. So this is, instead of sitting around a table, this is the way I try to get my clients to manage the work. Instead of a meeting at a table, we sit in a semicircle and we face boards on the wall in which each trade has planned their work. Instead of the meeting being held by the job superintendent, I think you call them the site engineer. We have the different trade foremen explaining their plan and everybody else listening and debating that. So the man in the orange shirt is a plumbing foreman. The two men in the doorway are the superintendents, and the young woman in green is the project manager, and she is standing by what we call a constraints board, looking for things that will stop the work. So the plumbing foreman is talking about his plan, and everyone is listening. So a lot of information gets exchanged in this meeting. Each trade comes up separately and talks about his plan. In that particular meeting, a problem cropped up, and two or three of the trades came up to the front of the room and resolved it. And the man in the white shirt is the concrete contractor. The man in the green shirt is the stucco contractor. And the man sitting down listening very intently is the electrician. He is interested in what they're saying because he knows until they get their work done, he won't be able to put up lights on the outside of the building. So people are really interested in paying attention. So this is a project at a university near where I live, and they called me up one day. It's a nursing school and a pharmacy school, and they called me up one day and said, we've got about 5 months to go on our project, and we are 5 weeks behind schedule. They asked me, do you think that the lean last planner would help us? And I said, well, it certainly won't hurt. So we employed the last planner system on that job, and they both schools, the pharmacy and the nursing school, finished on time because of the collaboration among all the foremen that the last planner brings about. This project was 3 months behind schedule, probably about 6 months from the end of the job. They had taken, the superintendent and the project manager had taken my classes, my AGC classes, but they had really forgotten what it meant, and they were not utilizing the last planner the way it should be. We organized that for their project, and they had been 3 months behind, but they finished on time. And here's a picture of their meeting room. They put up boards all around this room. We call these rooms the big room because we want it to be big enough for the people that are building the job to get together and plan and talk things over. So the superintendent, the project leader, is standing up there to the left, but he's not talking. The plumbing foreman there is talking, and the man sitting at the chair with a blue checked shirt, he's sitting by a constraints board. And as the foreman talks about his problem, if a constraint comes up that he's worried about that's going to affect his work, the project manager writes it on the board. So this is a project that I didn't have anything to do with, but it's a good comparison. I watched it going up on the coast of the Gulf Coast of the United States, and it was taking 8 work days to raise each individual floor during the structure, and that's long even for non-lean projects, but it was taking that long. So this is a project I coached, a company that had not been doing lean at all, and they were raising this building 1 floor every 3 days using the lean and the last planner. So 1 floor every 3 days. It goes up very fast. in the background to the right behind the tall building is a building of the same size and the same height, which started first, and the project in the foreground is 10 floors ahead of the one in the background who were not practicing lean. This is a similar project. This is the first one that this contractor was offered to build. The competitor who originally had the job said it would take 15 months to put up this building and garage. His client said that's too long. We need something faster. So they went to this company whose name is in the bottom and said, how fast could you build this? And they said they could build it in 13 months. The other contractors in that city did not believe that, but yet they built it in less than 12 months. They built it in 51 weeks. And this was the first time they'd ever tried to use the lean processes and thoughts. This is a project I coached that's nearing completion. It's a 24-story building. It's in Florida. It's 2.5 months ahead of schedule because they have done all of the things that the last planner system of lean construction encourages people to do. So it succeeded greatly for them. This is a project that I was responsible for in Houston. Every year, the AGC that Warren represents offers a Build America Award, and they have several different categories, and they award this award based on the process that a contractor builds, not the design, not anything else, but just the process. And so our process included lean construction, and we won the award that particular year. So you may have seen this sketch. This shows the levels of what we're calling the last planner system. I mentioned that often a schedule is made at the beginning on a CPM, and everyone experiences this pretty much, that not very long into the project, that CPM schedule can become obsolete because different things have happened, different delays have happened, and people are starting to try to do whatever they can to keep busy. So the person that made that schedule is called the first planner. But the planning that the superintendents on the job and their foreman do is the planning that actually gets the project built. And so the founders of Lean Construction Institute said, we need to really dive into this and come up with a system that people can use. So there's these 5 levels of the Lean Last Planner system. The first 2 are the master plan, which is the CP, and what we call the pull planning. We say that is the should schedule. That's what the planners said should happen on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. To make that work, there's a period called a make-ready planning where we're looking for the constraints that would keep tasks from beginning or being completed. We call planning. Below that is the weekly work planning, when the foreman and the superintendent say, we will get this done. We promise you, other foremen and superintendents, we will get this done. And they try their best to have a good plan that's reliable to each other and that the people that follow them can depend upon. And then we try to learn from what didn't happen and get better each week. So we call that the should, can, will, and did planning. And those are the levels of the last planner system. So I'm going to show you some pictures of people practicing the last planner system. The first level was the CPM, and what I like to do is get the superintendent and his assistants on a project to first convert that CPM schedule into a milestone schedule, and just the starts and finishes of each phase of the project. Often, and most often, when a project in the U.S. gets started, the superintendent and the project manager and their assistants, they arrive at the project at a different time. Usually the project manager knows the schedule and everybody else has to learn it. They learn it in different degrees. So, and what we do in this we have the assistants make up a milestone ticket. That's a diamond-shaped ticket. We have them make up a ticket of the start of the concrete, the finish of the concrete, the start of the exterior, the finish of the exterior. And we have the superintendent place it on a time scale sheet of paper. So it becomes a visual understanding of what that complicated CPM schedule says. It becomes a visual picture of that all of these men that are doing this together begin to understand the project together in the same way. It has done several things. We have learned often when we do this that there's maybe a flaw in the schedule. They learn how tight their time is. They learn a lot by doing this together. Here's an example of another project that used that. If you see, it's very congested looking because we used a smaller piece of paper. But you can see there is a geometry to this. You can see the flow in the different color. Each different trade has a different color, and each trade has their milestones up, and you can see there's a flow to it when you look at it this way. So when there's not a flow, when something looks wrong on that schedule, we dig to it to possibly a problem with the original. You see red dots up there. Those are places that we decided when we did this particular one might be too tight, too little time, and places that we might have trouble with. In this particular case, this was a courthouse in a small town in Louisiana, and the project that did this finished 2 months early because they really understood the project from this visual schedule. The tall project that finished in 2.5 months early, this is their milestone plan, and you can also see that you can feel the flow looking at that. At the top of that, they put the contract milestones for when you start and finish, when you top out, when you turn over certain areas, anything the contract required, they put at the top. So they got a very good understanding of that project. The project we showed a few minutes ago with all the people gathered around the table, to the right here is the milestone plan that the superintendents and project managers made the day before. And then on that day, we had all of the trade foremen in for the initial phase of the project. This is the pull plan that they made. So we juxtapose these side by side so we could refer one to the other. What all this does is brings a lot of different minds into the thinking. It's not just the one or two people that made the initial schedule, but the people that have to put it together are all involved in how this should work. So that's this is that session again. They're planning the order of handoffs between trades, between the plumbers, between the electricians, between the concrete people, and they're all thinking this job through together. So this is the third level of that diagram we looked at. This is phase planning, or what we call pull planning. And this is a very simple use of it. There was a particular project that I helped with, and they couldn't get started because they had a number of temporary roads around the project that while they moved utilities in front of another building. And so we defined, at the left-hand side, we defined 4 different bottlenecks that were keeping them from opening up the site where they could excavate it. So we made a milestone of those 4 bottlenecks to complete them. And then we looked to the right of that and said, what is the last thing that has to happen before we get to that milestone? And what's the last thing that has to happen before that, and before that, and before that? This is a pull plan done differently from what many people do it. Many people put their milestone that they're shooting for on the right side of the screen. I put them on the left side because it causes us to focus on where we're trying to get to first rather than where we are now. This is a more complicated situation, and this is the pull planning diagram that this set of contractors did to come out of the ground in a downtown city project. So after the milestone, after the pull planning is done, the next stage of that last planner diagram is to start having look-ahead meetings. We call them make-ready meetings. So we're looking for the problems that would keep us from doing what must be done in order to meet that schedule. So each trade comes to this meeting. We put a red milestone at the top of the boards that we're trying to hit in a certain period of time. And then each trade with their different colored stickies plan out their day-to-day work that they need to hit those red milestones. And you see there's a lot of conversation going on there among the different trades. We repeat that kind of meeting every week. We call it the weekly work planning meeting. And in this case, the man in the foreground with the black shirt looking the other way, he's the superintendent on the project. The man that's obviously speaking with the yellow sticky in his hand, he is the foreman for the excavation and the blasting on the project. He is talking about his plan, and others are listening and either arguing with him or debating it or realizing something they need to do. This is another project that's in that same stage, and suddenly they all realize a bunch of them needed to get up there and talk something over. So that's what happens with these kind of meetings. It's not just going to a meeting and somebody telling you what to do, but it's all the people agreeing on how they're going to get to that milestone. Those boards we keep up, and every day we ask the different trades to come in and talk about how did we do today with the plan we made, and are we ready to do what we need to do tomorrow. So the daily huddles are just a 2-day look at the schedule we made, the plan we made. Now, I mentioned constraints before, but a constraint could be, I'm supposed to start this particular job on Monday, but I don't have the material, or I don't have all the answers, or the work that goes before me is not progressing. These are things that constrain the team from getting done what they've plotted on those boards. The project manager, in this case, keeps a constraints board in the room, and every time anyone says they've got a constraint, or we guess that they've got a constraint, those are listed on the board, and each week before people leave the meeting, they talk about the progress of getting those things done. If the constraints don't get done, the work will stop or will be delayed. So here's a couple of kind of boards I like. The one on the right is a constraints board. So every time something comes up, we put a date and a activity description, and then we put a person's name who's going to resolve that constraint, and we put when we need to have it resolved, and therefore people leave that meeting knowing they've got an assignment to clear that up. The board on the left is what I call a bottlenecks board. A bottleneck is the slowest operation in a process. And so, for instance, if an electrician doesn't have enough people, then everybody that follows that electrician is going to be delayed. And so we teach people to try to look for those bottlenecks and put them on a board just like constraints and try to help that bottleneck speed up. So Tony talked about these things this morning. This is a diagram that shows you can't start an activity if you don't have the D, P, and the R. The D stands for directives, information. The P stands for prerequisite work, and the R stands for resources. So a task that doesn't have all those three things shouldn't be on the plan if it really can't be done. So once it gets on the plan, if there's too much work, if it's too crowded, that's when the work planned is greater than the capability and the team is overburdened. If the capability is greater than the work that has to be done, then we're wasting resources. In traditional planning, before we had lean, what's on the CPM schedule is represented in that purple circle. Those are the things that the planner said should be done this week. Of the things that should be done, many can, but some can't be done because they haven't been cleared up from the constraints. Of the things that should and can be done, there's some that people want to do something else instead of saying we will do what should and can be done. Some of the things they say they will do are really don't need to be done right then. They're outside of that should circle. And people are working on non-value creating activities instead of the value creating activities. What we're trying to do with the last planner system is to align what should, what can, and what will be done. And at the end of the week, we can say, we did it, we got it done. So these big rooms that have all the planning boards on them should also have a key drawing of the project that shows the direction of flow that all of the trades agree to. And so this is a 42-story building in the United States, and these arrows represent the direction of the flow that each trade will take when they go through the building. This, we won't spend much time on this, but this is a flow chart that I have developed to show people how to organize on a calendar basis their should planning and their can planning and their would planning. These are a series of the meetings. The meetings, this looks like a lot of meetings, but they don't happen all at once. We have a master schedule at the top, then we make that milestone schedule, and then we break the job up into the different phases, and we do pull plans on each of those. Further on down, we have the weekly meetings. So I'm not going to go into this anymore, but people are often confused about when to do all of this. But this is a thing I developed to help people understand that. So again, I want to look back at this job that's doing all of the last planner components, all of the requirements, all of the things that I taught them to do, and they are 2.5 months ahead of schedule because there's not a lot of waiting between trades. They're all working there together, and we have something we call a PPC, and a PPC is the percentage of what we planned which was completed, the percentage planned complete. It's not measuring the PPC each week is not measuring how much work is getting done, because different activities have different numbers of people and equipment that need to work on. What the PPC is measuring is how reliable of a plan did we all make together. And if we made a reliable plan that others can depend on, and we keep monitoring this with the weekly meetings and the daily meetings, the higher percentage of these that we get done indicates how well we're going to do with the schedule. We say that the if a PPC is consistently above 80%, we will finish early, we're on time or early, and we will make money. And in this particular project, 2.5 months early, they never had a PPC. They only had 2 PPCs under 80%. All the rest of them were between 80 and 100. So they were making very good plans with each other because they were talking to each other, they were listening to each other, and they were trying to help each other. So that's pretty much the end of my time, and I took more time than I was allotted, sorry.
It's really enriching, so we love to hear you.
Hey, Ed, we do have a question, and Tony, feel free to chime in too. But what's the difference between like a Lean Six Sigma or Lean manufacturing and the Lean construction?
Well, what I like to say is we construction people are manufacturers. We just move our factory around. And in lean manufacturing is a antidote to mass production. Mass production is the way industry in the world has worked for 100 years or more. And in mass production, we have believed that the more of something you do, the cheaper the price. So when the Model T Ford was put on the assembly line, the purpose was to get the cost down so people could afford it. And they did that. But we have found, Toyota found that there's a lot of waste in mass production, and all of this lean comes from of an understanding we gained of the Toyota production system, which learned to identify bottlenecks and other wastes and eliminate them. So I can't answer the question about Six Sigma, but it's more connected with industrial projects, industrial production, but it's trying to do the same thing. It's trying to have a good workflow with less waste, focused on delivering value to the clients. And I don't know if you know this, but after World War II, Toyota said, in trying to rebuild their industry, they said, if we love Henry Ford and the Ford production system, but if we do what they do, we will go broke with waste. And instead of making a lot of cars and hoping to sell them, they sent their salesmen to the Japanese homes and to find out what they wanted, and then they built what people wanted as they wanted it. And that's where the concept of pull came from.
Okay, that's a great explanation. But lean construction was adapted from the lean manufacturing mode, and there's a number of concepts like the last planner system, target value design, the lean project delivery system. There are tools like A3s, value stream mapping, Gemba walks, 5S, and daily huddles that kind of incorporate the practice of lean on sites, and that's the kind of things you'll learn in the education program. So Ed, we have another question that says, has lean been used for any infrastructure work like tunneling work and for hydropower projects?
Yes, not by me, but yes, it's used in a lot of different kind of construction projects.
So there's universal application because it's part of the project management cycle.
Yeah, absolutely, Warren. We implemented this lean practices in infrastructure, the building, the corporate interior. So all the type of projects the lean can be implemented. Yeah, Ed, you are saying something. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, what we're trying to eliminate is waiting between one trade and the work of the next trade. And if any process that you're doing, whether it's construction or building a car or building a tunnel, digging a tunnel and building the rail line under the tunnel, all of those are processes that hand off from one trade to the next. And so any process that depends on a sequence of events can be helped by lean thinking. I noticed that there are two other questions on my sheet.
Yes.
One is, did you have any experience of working in a project where PPC was below 80? Yes, many experiences with that. And when the founders of LCI came up with the idea for Last Planner, they would go to projects, and listen to what people said they were going to do next week. And then they'd go back the next week and find out how many of those had gotten done. They found that on average, only 54% of things people said they were going to do in a meeting actually got done. And that caused the job to be compressed near the end, and people spending a lot of overtime and extra people trying to overcome that. So when I have started the Last Planner system with trades, their first week for doing this, because they're not used to planning their work, they're used to being told what to do. The first week, it's usually often their PPC is only like 45 or 50%. Because they're not used to it. And then gradually it gets better. A project that has a superintendent who doesn't believe in this or doesn't want to change his ways, generally stays under 80%, maybe 60 and 70%. So it's the projects that can complete early that have really used the system well, but people don't get there automatically. And the other question I had was, do you have any experience working on a project where PPC was? Oh no, the next question was, can you elaborate on the difference between a bottleneck and a constraint with an example from your experience? Well, a constraint is something missing without which you cannot start the task, or you cannot complete the task. It's physically impossible. You don't have the steel, you can't put the steel up. That's a constraint. The concrete foundations for the steel are not there yet. That's a constraint. A bottleneck is a slowing of a process. A bottleneck is maybe because a trade doesn't have enough people, or they're not getting information fast enough, and they're just working more slowly, and everybody that follows them is held up by their slowness. And then there's the third question, but the customer fails to pay on time. That wipes out flow. If people are not getting paid, they very well may not put enough people on the job, and therefore it slows the project down.
Yeah, that's great. Ed, there is another question which is saying, actually, I put that question into three things. It's come to my email. A project consists of multiple stakeholders, customers, contractors, subcontractors. So the question is, how to integrate all these stakeholders under lean programs. Suppose the contractor is performing as per the plan in the lean principle, but the customer fails to pay on time. So similarly, if the subcontractor supplies a default on their deliveries. So they're trying to say that everyone is working in a different direction. So he's asking how the last planner system is bringing everyone together.
Well, what I've done, those projects that were 3 months behind and 5 weeks behind, they had people that did not want to do this. They wanted to keep doing things the way they'd always done them. Often they didn't have a superintendent that wanted to change his ways. And what I do, and I was doing it last week with a company, I have them write a letter to all of their trade, we call subcontractors trade partners. I have them write a letter to all of their trade partners, briefly explaining why this lean process would be beneficial to each company, and explaining that it's a little different, and we will have some training about that when we meet to do a pull plan. And so we met last week to do a pull plan, and about 3 of the subcontractors present had participated in this before, and the other 4 or 5 had not. And so one of the first things we do is ask the contractors that have participated in it if it helped them, if it worked for them. And in this particular case, they were very enthusiastic. Yes, I would never want to build a job without this. And so they helped. The training helped, and those experienced contractors helped bring along those that didn't have any experience with this. And then when we did the pull plan, and these people were asked their opinion of how the schedule should go, the plan should go together, they felt respected. When they came to the pull plan, I made sure that the contractor greeted each one of them and told them how much they appreciated them coming. when we respect people and listen to them, listen to their concerns, help them understand, uh, they're 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 eager to come talk. But if all that is not explained to them, and they're doubtful, sometimes you have a hard time making this work because some some participants won't, some players will not participate. But mostly people are eager to get better, and they're eager to be treated better. And the first pillar of lean construction is to respect the individuals. And I like to say that every one of us wants to matter. We want to be uh, thought well of. We want to be contributing. And when we're treated like we are and we're appreciated, we will get on board. And if we just treat people like commodities, it's just it won't work. So the first thing to do is treat people well, like you want to be treated.
Ed, one interesting question. It's actually they posted when the top management doesn't want to believe in lean. How lean can be implemented? The client, the owners, or the decision maker, or the management doesn't believe in lean. So is it possible to implement lean?
It's possible for a project to succeed even if the top management is not interested, but it is so much better if the top management lets their people know we are interested, we want you to do this, we expect to see these practices on your job, and we'll be looking for it. That's when it works. If the top management just delegates this to someone else to make us lean, it doesn't go very far.
Yeah, thanks, sir.
I was called into a meeting one day and with a company and asked, would you look at what we're doing and tell us if anything we're doing is lean so we can tell our clients that we're lean? And I had to say, no, you're not. You don't understand it yet, but you can get there. And they did, and they're the ones that built that building in 51 weeks.
Oh, great, great. Okay, the last question, Ed, is there any possibility to implement techniques of industrial engineering like time study, the method study, and the motion study? Many of the activities which are being performed are not ergonomically correct. So any initiatives are there in Lean to address such issues?
Yes, I think so. One of the things we talk about in Lean and Last Planner is a first run study. So say you have a group of people putting up windows or curtain wall on a job, and they're doing it the old way they used to do it. So we'll watch what they did in the first week and record that, and then get them together to say how might we improve this. And the next week we measure it again, and the next week we measure it again. So the first, Tony has mentioned something called PDCA. We make a plan, we do it, we check how we did, and then we make adjustments. And so that first run study can be a time study, and is a time study, as we learn to take out the waste and compress the time it takes us to do something. So yeah, I think any of those kind of things will be helpful. I would like to say that these courses build upon each other. Like I told you, when I first heard about this, I thought the founders were crazy, that nobody could ever do all of that. There's so many things to learn that it can be confusing at first, but the classes build on each other. The first two classes help you understand what's wrong. The second two classes help you change that. The fifth class helps you realize the great impact that the supply chain has on it, and the sixth, the great impact collaborating with the architects can help on the project, and the seventh is how to solve problems. So it sounds like a lot at first, but it builds on each other. And the classes, my classes, and I think most of them, my classes are very collaborative. We sit in a semicircle, and it's not a lecture by me. It is a conversation. I'll bring up an idea and then get people to talk about that idea, and so the whole class is a conversation. We with the virtual classes, we do the same thing. We do it on Zoom, but we do it looking at each other and talking these ideas over. And so you build upon what other people ask. You build upon putting these different ideas together. And the best way to learn it is take the class, but then put it to use on your projects. That's when you really learn how to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I completely echo what you're saying and what you said, Egg. So it's a great experience. You know, I learned a lot of information and inputs from your speech today as well. So thanks a lot. It is really a great, insightful session from Ed, and also Warren for giving all the details and input about the AGC program as well, and you know, keeping our participants informed about the LCP program and CM Lead program. So